Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in New York on a Friday. Donald Trump's chaos, incompetence, and governing at a time of war by Truth Social Post has come back to bite him in the you-know-what when it comes to the war with Iran. An abrupt decision to launch an operation led to pushback from stalwart allies of the United States in the region and a humiliating public climb-down by Donald Trump. Multiple outlets, including NBC News, The Wall Street Journal, and The New York Times, are today able to report that Donald Trump was forced to stop what the administration had dubbed Project Freedom and announced it was a plan to help ships cross the Strait of Hormuz after Saudi Arabia refused to let the U.S. military use its bases and airspace. Here's how NBC News describes it. Quote, Trump surprised Gulf allies by announcing Project Freedom on social media Sunday afternoon, the official said, angering leadership in Saudi Arabia. The call between Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman did not resolve the issue, the two U.S. officials said, forcing the president to pause Project Freedom in order to restore U.S. military access to the critical airspace. Donald Trump angered other allies in the region as well. A Middle Eastern diplomat with knowledge of the matter told our colleague David Rode that Donald Trump failed to tell Oman, the country that sits on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz from Iran. Other outlets report that Kuwait and Qatar were not informed either. The Trump administration insists that allies were notified in advance. Donald Trump claimed on Truth Social that the operation was paused because of progress in negotiations, but there is no known reporting to suggest that that is actually the case. Regardless, the operation was not going particularly well for the United States. Just 2 ships made it through the Strait of Hormuz in 36 hours. Here's how the Wall Street Journal describes the journey of one of those 2 ships. From that reporting, quote, the Alliance Fairfax, a towering black and white car carrier ship that had been stranded in the Persian Gulf for over 2 months, was finally making a break for it. Quote, you were all set to go, U.S. military officer radioed as the ship glided through the Strait of Hormuz on Monday and swung around the peninsula at the northern end of Oman. Safe travels. Soon after, Iran launched a barrage of missiles and drones at commercial ships, at the U.S. Navy, and at one of America's allies, the United Arab Emirates, where an oil transit hub was set ablaze. U.S. helicopters sank Iranian speedboats, and Iranian drones hit a civilian ship. The intervening hours included the most serious escalation in the conflict since President Trump declared a ceasefire in the war in April. That's where things stand right now, and that's where we are. A ceasefire in which both the U.S. military and Iran are attacking each other, but also claiming that the ceasefire remains in effect. U.S. Central Command announced this morning that U.S. forces attacked 2 ships that were violating the blockade on Iranian ports. Donald Trump set back on his heels after backlash from close allies over a hastily arranged plan to break Iran's control over one of the world's most important waterways. Is unfortunately where we begin today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama, Ben Rhodes, is back. Also joining us, Puck News senior political columnist and national affairs analyst John Heilman is here. And with me at the table, our national security reporter, the aforementioned David Rode. Everyone wants America to win. Everyone wants American military assets and any commercial assets to be safe. No one is rooting against America or, in this capacity, Donald Trump. But there is an unavoidable reality to the fact, I mean, it is really hard to piss off Saudi Arabia, and we have done that.
In 50 years, this hasn't happened. That's what's so extraordinary. And the fact that the president launched this incredibly important operation, and it might have succeeded. It was to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by force. It would have taken Iran's big leverage point away from them. It would have brought down energy prices eventually, and it was very well planned, and it was only America could do it. They complained about other countries, but there was 100 aircraft providing 24/7 sort of air cover for this operation. And it is astounding that the president and his aides did not inform any of our allies in the country. From Saudi Arabia, the stalwart you talked about, to Oman, which actually borders the waterway and should have known. And it's incredible. And then the Wall Street Journal's reporting, great reporting by our former colleagues at NBC, breaking it. And then Kuwait closed its airspace also. It's astonishing, again, how many unforced errors are happening. And then lastly, the president lies about why he ends the operation. He claims it's because there's progress in the negotiations with Iran, when in fact it's because Saudi Arabia and Kuwait closed their airspace to U.S. aircraft.
Donald Trump it's like a signature of his rule to alienate our NATO allies, but it's a new feature to alienate our Mideast allies. Just talk about the risks for him having ostracized all of our NATO allies and now put America in a place of, frankly, unprecedented tensions with these allies in the Mideast.
The risk will be clear next week when he goes to China. And he's not going as a weak leader with plenty of allies around him. Instead, he's systematically alienating people with off the cuff ideas or insulting them. I mean, if you just go back to Canada being the 51st state, Greenland was, then the focus, and then this, war of choice in Iran, and just belittling the Europeans who have lots of minesweepers, lots of ships that could have been part of this. And even if he wanted to go to war with Iran, he could have done it in the Bush way. George H.W. and George W. getting a coalition together, going to the UN Security Council, saying Iran is violating these things, Ben, and can say more about this. But instead, it's a go it alone and insult your allies. And then again, to launch this operation without telling, Saudi Arabia and all these countries was just a huge mistake that I think will haunt this country and his presidency.
Ben Rhodes, to be a fly on the wall when MBS, for whom Donald Trump towed the line on Khashoggi better than literally some Saudis did, for MBS to say, I've seen enough, I'm out, is just an extraordinary point to be pushed to when it comes to Donald Trump's conduct.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple things to it. I mean, to kind of return to your opening, Nicolle, I think the problem is nobody knows what America's trying to win. It started with regime change, and then, the destruction of the nuclear program. Those things, did not come to fruition. Now winning just seems to be opening a strait of water that was open before the war. And so the fact that Trump doesn't even really know why he's doing what he's doing, I think is a reason why these allies just don't trust him, because they're not consulted. They've not been brought in at any juncture of this war. And then to focus specifically on the Saudis, the cost to these countries is much, much higher than the cost to the United States. And so already, Qatar has had the largest liquefied natural gas field in the world taken offline, huge hit to their revenue. Kuwait, all these Gulf states have suffered dramatic economic consequences that are going to be lasting for years. Never mind the fact that our European and Asian allies are suffering far more shortages than just high gas prices than Americans are suffering. And look, if he did this Project Freedom, what the Saudis knew is that the Iranians would start attacking again, and they'd start attacking Saudi oil facilities and Saudi energy infrastructure. And so if you're Saudi Arabia, if you're MBS, and you're sitting there and thinking, this guy has not made me a partner from day one, he's bungled this whole war. I don't even frankly know why he's doing it, even if the Saudis don't like the Iranians. Now, why should I allow my airspace used and recognize that I'm going to be attacked by Iranian drones and missiles and potentially suffer huge economic consequences for a war that I don't even understand at this point? That's where we are. And it is a huge geopolitical shift because, as David points out, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis, people with enormous resources have options. And those options include Beijing. They can start to realign themselves geopolitically. And I think that's going to happen, frankly. I mean, not totally, but they're certainly going to hedge. And what we're going to see is the consequences of this war can be felt for many years. Because if you have Gulf states and Europeans and others moving away from the United States, making their own arrangements with the Chinese and others, that's a totally new world that we're going to be in because of this war.
And let me just press you, not just a new world, but a more dangerous world. I mean, Ben, the only country you haven't mentioned is Russia. But Russia's alliance with Iran in an operational manner seems to be strengthened as well.
Not just that. I mean, there are a couple of things to that. First of all, the Pentagon has not been transparent at all about the damage that's been done to U.S. facilities across the region. And the reporting, which is not surprising to me, is that damage is far more extensive than we knew. Very pinpoint strikes have been launched by the Iranians against U.S. facilities. That's probably, and again, I don't have intelligence, I would assume because the Russians are providing intelligence and information to the Iranians to help them do literal damage to the United States military presence in the Middle East. Never mind the fact that driving up the price of oil, as this war is done, that pads Putin's war machine, because that's how Putin gets revenue, from selling oil. And never mind the fact that the United States has literally had waivers on sanctions that prevented the sale of Russian oil to countries like India because we're so worried about the price of gas. So this is just a geopolitical gift from the heavens to Russia and China, and it's just been devastating to U.S. allies in Europe, in Asia, and in the Middle East. And it just means that the United States, can't be trusted. These countries, I think, are exasperated. The Gulf countries tried to flatter Trump. In many cases, they contributed to enriching Trump's family. And now they see that at the end of the day, I mean, one more thing that I hear from people in the Gulf, too, is that we provided a lot of missile defense support to Israel that we did not provide to the Gulf. So they felt a bit like left out in the cold after this war began, that many of them opposed and didn't support because they knew what the Iranian response would be. So I think it's hard for people to understand just how much this has shaken the Gulf Arabs, who literally have an entire security paradigm that is based on stability, predictability.